Welcome everyone to episode 49 of the Phoenix Report. I am Jack Connor, and with me is a guest who I've never actually really never met until now. This was someone who contacted me. She is actually someone who had listened to an earlier episode of mine, but was a fan of the podcast and decided to weigh in on a particular topic that had a lot of significance in her life. So she decided to reach out to me. I don't remember exactly what spurred this on. I'm sure she'll let us know when we get into it. But apparently the subject of depression came up and how music can help with depression. And I thought that was a really interesting topic. As I even mentioned in, my original, the first ever post of this show, I kind of told my life story and how, I do struggle with depression. I still take medication for it. It's not, it's not something that I would say I'm manically depressed or anything like that, but, it is an issue that hits close to home for me, and the fact that she was willing to talk about it was really interesting. And I also wanted to bring her on, especially because it's part of what she does for a living. She is a pharmacist here in Orlando, so I think we'll just go ahead and get into it. Please welcome to the Phoenix Report, Dr. Meghan.
Hi, everybody.
How's it going, Meghan?
It's good, Jack. I just had my pizza, so I'm ready to talk.
That's right. It's a Sunday night. You ordered in. Sound like it's a good night to me.
Yeah, and thank you for having me on here. I think I reached out to you because, I just wanted to, see if, you'd have anybody on your show that wasn't, an actual musician and get it from a perspective from, someone else outside of the music industry. But music has helped me a lot, with my own issues and depression, anxiety. But I don't know, your whole story. I just know, what I see on a daily basis at work. And I know it's a touchy subject sometimes for people who want to come forward and.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think especially with what you do for a living, as a pharmacist, it's probably an issue that you're very much aware of, and something that you know quite a bit about. So I think you're very well qualified to talk about it, and that's the thing with my show. I mean, yes, I do focus mainly on musicians, because I am one, but I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of interesting people in my life, and it's basically seen as how it's kind of my show. I can pretty much talk to whoever I want, so it works out.
I just know that personally, if I'm going through something, music has helped me in a way that sometimes I can't actually talk about my feelings, and I know music has been able to communicate those feelings for me, and so I just wanted to reach out to you because as a musician, you could understand that point of view. But it's weird because, as a pharmacist, I have to still be, I have to have that professionalism and that side of me where, if a customer, or a patient comes to me for help, I have to know, there's really nothing, I can't really honestly remember. I just, and it's sad because, what's been going on lately, with Parkland and the shootings and stuff, and I know people are kind of having the stigma about mental illness, and I don't want it, it's unfortunate for that, but I don't want it to be, something that people are afraid to come forward and talk about, because I have to be the pharmacist, but I also have to be the humans that, I
Sure.
go through it too, so.
Sure, no, I understand. And just as a little context, as we record this, it is Sunday, February 18th, 2018. The previous week, there had been a terrible school shooting. It was in South Florida where this happened. Just a terrible school shooting. I forget how many lives were lost, but it's
17.
Yeah, it was about 17, I think. But yeah, I mean, this is something that certainly over the last, I would say, 10, 20 years has, unfortunately, you do hear more and more about these things here in the United States, and it's a terrible thing. And as you can imagine, it elicits a huge response from a lot of people, and a lot of it is politicized. A lot of it has to do with, sparks conversations about, gun control and laws and how these public schools are, and bullying, and a lot of different things, a lot of hot button issues. And that's not why I brought you on here. Obviously, I don't know what your politics are. I don't, it doesn't necessarily matter in this case. But what I do see a lot of, from social media, is that people talk about when these things happen. It's a good thing to have a greater conversation about mental health. And I figure, obviously that's something that you do for a living. So I think even by coming on the show, I think we are sort of opening up a conversation about mental health, which hopefully, if someone is listening that, and they need, and this provides comfort to them in some way, then I'm glad you're listening. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. I mean, obviously, like, I deal with patients that have other issues, diabetes or cancer. Mental health is just one of the many aspects, but it's one that hits home to me because I understand what they're going through, especially with side effects and the frustration of it all, with pharmaceuticals. And I don't know, your history, but I know I've, myself been on several antidepressants in the past and several medications for anxiety. And it can be frustrating sometimes, when, you go to the pharmacy and you don't know what to expect, and you don't know, how this is going to affect your body and your mind. But ultimately, I feel like the more we talk about it and the more we're open about it, the easier it'll be. And in regards to, the shooting, it's really sad that, right now they're saying he was mentally ill, and I don't want anyone to be afraid of admitting that they're suffering from depression or anxiety, because not everyone is a killer. That's completely
Absolutely
different.
Absolutely. I mean, you were curious about my history. Quick background on me. I think I do have some form of depression that runs in both sides of my family. My grandmother suffered with it for many years. She now takes Zoloft, I believe, and that's helped her out. She's still alive. She's doing great. I do feel like some of that comes from that side. And then on my dad's side, I think one of my aunts has suffered with it before. For me, I've always, I was always kind of a sensitive kid growing up. I dealt with bullying a lot, and through music and martial arts as well. Those were always things I went to help deal with it, and to help, those were things that helped to make me happy growing up. And music has definitely become a large part of my identity in many ways. It's still something I do even at 33. It's not necessarily my job per se, but it's something that I still go after quite a bit. So yeah, I mean, that's sort of a Cliff Notes version of of my history. I think for the past 10 to 12 years, I've taken Lexapro. It's fairly small dosage, and that's really helped me out a lot. In terms of having anxiety with relationships with other people, and just social anxiety and different relationships I've been in. A lot of it happened when I was going through. I'm trying to think about where I should start with it. But a lot of that sort of triggered with a relationship I was in for many years. I was engaged to my high school sweetheart, and unfortunately things didn't work out. She and I are still friendly to this day, but that was a really tough thing to go through, and certainly anxiety about when it came to girls and women. That's something that I've always kind of struggled with, and I'm happily married now, and we have a 8-month-old daughter. She's beautiful, but yeah, it's even as a married man, there's still always issues to work through, and I think that's probably normal for a lot of couples. Probably a lot more men that are willing to admit that they might be going through that sort of thing. So that's sort of just a brief history of sort of where I am, and I imagine I imagine there are a lot more people out there. I mean, I know there are certainly a lot of people who have it much worse than I do, but yeah, no, it's something that, depression is definitely something that I have, that I live with, and it's something that I think, I don't think it's necessarily overdiagnosed. I think there's a reason why it's diagnosed, as much as it is. So I think it's a very important thing that people really shouldn't shy away from talking about, because it's not a sign of weakness.
I agree, and it's, you brought up several factors. There's one that, you mentioned about your family history, and I do believe, some people are more genetically predisposed, and it's, has to do with a chemical imbalance, neurotransmitters in your brain. We're not all made the same, our chemistry is different, so
Sure.
That's a valid point. Some people are just more susceptible to having depression, anxiety, just based on their biology. And you also brought up, your relationship and how the stresses of that environment, probably set you further deeper into depression, which is also, something I can relate to as well. So, sometimes, you'll go through something as an adult, and just the environmental stress of it will, make things harder. Because I was in a relationship in college. I was actually engaged.
Mm-hmm.
And, but, found out he had cheated on me, and I didn't want to continue with that. So
Sure.
It was hard.
Yeah.
That's when I actually started, to see a doctor, and because my mom, she had depression and anxiety, and she told me, maybe you should see somebody and get some help. And this was while I was in school to become a pharmacist, so it was kind of like a early adult onset thing for me. But everybody's different, even children, I feel like sometimes they can suffer from that. But, at the same time, it's not like something I would say to everybody, well, you need to see a doctor, you need to get a pill, you need to go to a pharmacy. Because I don't think, I think pharmaceuticals and prescription drugs are necessary sometimes in certain situations, but I don't think it's the end-all answer for these sort of problems. I feel like it's a broader piece of it's a whole pie, and just one piece of the pie is going to be pharmaceuticals. Like, you still need to talk to people, therapists or family, friends. You still need to take care of yourself, whether it's, eating healthy or doing hobbies and music or working out, or, it's just a collective picture that you have to look at. And I just think pharmaceuticals might just be one small piece. And I do feel like doctors probably don't address that with their patients, like the non-pharmaceutical solutions to their problems. And they're busy. They've got only so much time to spend with their patients. But I wish the customers and the patients that I see would realize that there's other ways to help your mind. So to have a healthy body, will give you a healthy mind, and vice versa. You can't just take a pill and neglect your body, and eat, junk food, or, not work out. You have to consider all aspects.
Sure.
Of it.
Well, I mean, like you mentioned, everyone is different. There is, I think, like anything, like any kind of diagnosis, you have to take it on a case-by-case basis. And, everyone has their own different, makeup and chemical makeup, genetic or otherwise. So I think to your point, it's not, like you said, it's probably not a good idea to have like just one, base, catch-all diagnosis for everybody, because like you said, everyone is different. So, but you do make a good point about, what kind of lifestyle you maintain in terms of how you take care of yourself and how that it's all kind of interconnected.
Yeah, because I used to take, medications, like you said, you took Lexapro. I took that before. I've probably taken like 10 different medications in my lifetime, because it was all pretty much trial and error. You know, not every antidepressant will work for a certain individual, because, like I said, it's based on your chemistry. But for the past 2 years, I've been off of medication, and it's not easy, but I specifically didn't want to have to rely on it, because of the side effects involved, and because I see it, you know, in the patients that come, you know, I know that they're dealing with the side effects, and it's just something, if I can avoid it, I will, you know, for myself. But everyone's different. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong to take medicine. If you need it, you need it. But it's always good to explore other options and see, you know, how you can strengthen your mind with other things, whether it's meditation, yoga, music, positive people in your life, you know, healthy lifestyle sort of thing.
Absolutely. When you made the decision to get off medication, do you see a therapist yourself? Because I imagine you're probably discouraged to self-diagnose.
Right, yeah. So I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Well, let me go back, actually. When I first saw a doctor when I was in college, they labeled me as depressed. So, because that's, you know, my mom has depression, and they figured, okay, that's what she has too. But then I moved to Florida after the whole incident, you know, with me breaking off my engagement, and, you know, I didn't have any more reason to be in Indiana, so I moved to Florida and saw a doctor in Florida, and they actually told me I was bipolar.
Are you from Indiana originally?
Oh, no, I'm from Ohio, but I went to school in Indianapolis for pharmacy school.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I still have family in Ohio, but I do have my mom and my stepdad are in Orlando here. So,
okay.
So I moved down here to be closer to them and just kind of start over and focus on me. So, yeah, when they diagnosed me as bipolar, that meant different medications. Instead of the typical antidepressants, the SNRIs and the SSRIs, it was mood stabilizers. Which was, you know, it helped me, and, you know, they said, no wonder you went through so many medications, because the actual antidepressants that are used for depression will make bipolar worse. You know, like, it can set you through manic episodes. So it made sense to me. It was a little frustrating that I went through so many different medications, and then found out years later that none of them were going to work anyways, because the diagnosis was not accurate. But I mean, that's what life is. It's just a bunch of trial and error and figuring out what works for you and what doesn't.
Were there any particular symptoms that you went through that made you realize that it wasn't working?
Yeah, just with the antidepressants, I mean, I just didn't feel myself. I would still wake up, in tears sometimes, just crying, and I didn't know why. I'd get such bad anxiety that I wouldn't leave my apartment, like sometimes I'd be, afraid to just go outside and see daylight. Like, I don't know what it is, but, sometimes when your mind gets in these dark places, it's kind of scary to, find your way out. And I know, among other things, there's, side effects like dry mouth and, fatigue, headaches. I mean, I went through all of it. And even with the mood stabilizers, there was one that I was on called lithium. And that one's a really tricky drug because you have to get your blood tested every month to make sure your levels are within this therapeutic range, like this small window where, if it goes above, you could have lithium toxicity. But I was getting my blood work done every month, and for some reason I still had tremors. And I remember being at work and giving flu shots, and I was nervous because my hands were shaking so much from the medication. I actually went to my boss and I said, like, I don't know what's going on, but I need to figure this out. I took a leave of absence for about a month and got off of the lithium, and eventually it all resolved itself. But, you know, it's a scary thing when, like, the medications can affect, you know, your work like that and, you know, your ability to perform daily functions. So, you know, I'm not saying all medications are bad, but there's some that, you know, you have to be aware of what the side effects would be, or the, you know, side effects or the symptoms of what, you know, of what, like, lithium toxicity in my case. But
Gotcha. It was more than just, like, you know, just having a bad day. It was, you know, there were definitely some physical symptoms involved. That's sort of...
Yeah, and I remember, like, my mom telling me that, you know, my siblings were all concerned about me because they said that every time they would talk to me, it sounded like I was drunk. Like, I would be slurring my speech. And it was heartbreaking to me because I wasn't obviously drunk. Like, I was just trying to get better, you know, mentally. And sometimes, yeah, there are certain medications that will, you know, affect you and make your speech slurred. Like, there was some anxiety medication that, you know, that I was taking as well to help me sleep. But, I mean, that's all behind me. Like, it's, you know, I learned from that. I realized, you know, the medications, they helped me get through what I needed to get through, but in the long-term aspect of things, I couldn't deal with, you know, the side effects. Like, I couldn't deal with feeling like I was a zombie all the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That, I mean, that's definitely an unpleasant thing to go through. You know, it's funny hearing your story. Kind of reminds me of, you know, kind of if I could segue back into music and musicians for a bit. One of my favorite singers of the last couple years was Scott Stapp of Creed, and he had a very public meltdown a few years ago. Because, you know, it was only recently where he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And I think whatever medications he was on before, you know, and he's had his issues on and off over the years with substance abuse, but, like, I want to say 3 years ago, he had, you know, kind of a bad meltdown and everything, which, you know, it was in the news for a while, but I think finally he got a hold of it and he's on the right medication now, and by all accounts, he's doing good, and he's, you know, touring again and making music. So, but, you know, I think it's interesting that, you know, a lot of musicians and artists probably tend to go through to share a lot of these symptoms that, you know, maybe you might have, or other people suffering with depression might have. I'm curious about what the attraction to that might be.
You mean, are you insinuating that musicians are more likely to have depression, anxiety based on their brain?
Well, I don't know if there's necessarily a chemical breakdown of it. I think a lot of people who do find themselves who do kind of rely on artistic expression. I think there's been a history of that. You know, a lot of these people. Yeah, I mean, like, a lot of these people, like, even as far as, like, Vincent van Gogh and stuff like that, you know, he was obviously a very, you know, he definitely had a lot of issues that he was trying to work through. And I'm not saying that there's a causality. I'm not saying that you necessarily need to be depressed in order to be a good artist or a good musician or anything. But, you know, I do feel like there are a lot of people out there who do suffer from these things. And certainly in rock music, you know, there's been a whole history of people who do that. Because everyone knows, you know, rock music, especially, you know, is for the excess part of it and the substance abuse. And I think a lot of that has to do with the stress, not only the stresses of the job, but also the fact that people tend to self-medicate, and they tend to, you know, kind of, you know, use drug and alcohol abuse as a way to medicate themselves rather than, you know, go see a professional and have them diagnose those problems. You know, I'm sure that that's not limited to a musician thing, obviously, but it's interesting how people will almost, you know, be wary of, medications and other prescriptions, but also, turn to illegal drugs and alcohol in order to medicate themselves. It's a very strange connection there. And I'm not sure if there is a diagnosable connection for that, but I imagine that it kind of runs hand in hand with with music being a part of that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like sometimes it might be a pride thing, or it might be like if you're ashamed of what you're going through because you don't want to be labeled as something. You know, you don't want to be labeled as depressed or bipolar or something. You'll try to find something else to soothe your pains, I guess, and that makes sense. I mean, we're all human. Like, we all go through times where we feel like, okay, maybe some alcohol will numb this, or it's everyone has their own outlets, and I guess part of life is just figuring out outlets that are healthy. So for me, I used to dance a lot growing up, so music has helped me, not only just because I love listening to it, but because, it provided, a way for me to dance and express things that I couldn't say out loud,
Sure.
So everyone has, their own way of coping, and, but that is interesting, that, you mentioned that, because I definitely see the connection there as well.
Well, I mean, I think certainly a year ago we were really, at least the music fans were really, really reminded of that. With the losses of Chris Cornell and Chester Bennington, especially. I think the fact that those two guys had tragically taken their own lives within months of each other was a real wake up call for a lot of people, and it was unsettling to a lot of people, and made if there's any good that came out of that, is that maybe it did inspire a wider conversation about mental health, and you have people like Corey Taylor now who I think had this this organization called like the You Rock Foundation or something like that, where they discourage people from suicide, and they encourage people to talk to somebody and to work through it, and to work through their issues, and to hang on. So I think that's a really with losing Chris and Chester the way we did last year, I think there has been some good that came out of it, and I think is that people are talking about it more.
Yeah, and I mean, definitely don't be afraid to talk about this if you do have suicidal thoughts. And I even know that sometimes when you start a new medication, there's a black box warning, that says if you do have any suicidal or homicidal thoughts, to contact your doctor immediately, because sometimes that'll set someone who's already depressed into a further depressed mode, as ironic as it sounds, because you would think an antidepressant would have the opposite effect, but sometimes it has the reverse effect. And
Sure.
There is, a small chance that someone who starts a new medication for the first time will have suicidal thoughts after starting it, and it's something you have to have monitored. The doctor should be the one to warn the patients of that, and to follow up with them within 2 weeks, I would say, of starting a new medication for that very reason.
Sure. No, I absolutely. Is there, going back to you for a second, you mentioned that music was definitely an outlet for, for your emotions and difficulties you were going through in your life. Is there a particular song or artist or that you've gravitated to over the years? Is there a particular song or anything that you identify with that helps you feel better when you're not feeling so good?
I mean, my taste in music is pretty eclectic. Like, I've grown up my whole life listening to classical music, because it's what my dad would play in the car,
Really?
And then I still listen to, rock, and I still listen to EDM. I wouldn't say there's one particular band or song or anything that comes to mind right now. It's basically just whatever speaks to me, like whether it's the lyrics or just the actual mood of the song. I know lately I've been really enjoying Bryce Fox. I don't know if you've heard of him, but his music is kind of edgy. It's rock, but it's got more of like I don't know. It's I can't really.
Did you say Bryce Fox? Is that the name?
Bryce Fox. Yeah, that's the name of the artist. I've been listening to him a lot. I've been listening to Slaves, Devil's Envy. Yeah.
Devil's Envy. I am familiar with, obviously.
Yeah.
The other ones. The other ones not so much, but I could definitely check them out once we're done.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I have just like one genre that I identify with. I would say like I'm pretty open to anything. I typically like to listen to music that I can dance to.
Gotcha.
And I'm not talking like dance like EDM style. I'm just saying like dance like in my living room. Sometimes I'll just have my headphones on and I'll be like cleaning or vacuuming or doing chores, and some song will come on and I will just stop what I'm doing and just move. And it's not like
sure.
I even planned it. It's just something that speaks to me and gets me, feeling better. And I mean, I'm assuming other people are like that too. Like with art, like if they see a painting or a drawing that they really like, they're inspired to create something of their own. And so for me, it's just music has kind of been an inspiration to me over the years, just to get in touch with my own self and really hone in on what my feelings are.
Sure.
So,
I mean, I mean, there's a lot of there are a lot of people who will gravitate to a particular song or a particular artist. I know that like a lot of people will take like lyrical content, for example, and really gravitate toward that. Other people might just enjoy just hearing a good melody or hearing a good beat that they can dance to, or something that they could just nod their head to. Like I remember I was in the car with my wife one time, and I was playing this one song, that I was really, really liking a lot. I think it was called "Back on the Ground" by a guy named James LaBrie, who's the lead singer of Dream Theater. It was something from one of his solo albums, and I remember listening to that, and I was kind of looking over at my wife, and she was like, "I don't know if I really like this song," and I turned to her, and I'm like, why do you say that? She's like, well, in the song he's talking about, get your feet back on the ground, get your head out of the clouds and this and that, and again, I don't want to go through all the lyrics of the song, but it's just like I had a completely different reaction to that than she did, because and it's funny how like lyrical content can kind of skew people's opinions of these things either way. So it's like, in a way, it's like we listen to different things and get different we have different reasons for enjoying different things, and I think that makes things interesting. But it's interesting in your case, because it seems like it's not so much. Would you say it's just more like hearing a good beat or a good melody, or are there any lyrics in particular that jump out to you that help you get through the tough times?
I would say it's a combination of both. But yeah, there are some songs that I'm gonna pull up my playlist right now just so I can find.
Okay. Well, while you're doing that, I can tell you one song in particular that's coming to that I think of, that usually if I'm having a tough day, that I'll play that, and that makes me feel better. It's from a band called 6 a.m. And the song is called "Accidents Can Happen," and it has a really great line in there. Is like, that accidents can happen. Some days, we all fall off the wagon sometimes. It's not your whole life. It's only one day. you haven't thrown everything all away. I apologize if I butchered some of the lyrics. I might not have. I'm kind of paraphrasing that a little bit, but it's a really, it's kind of an interesting song, and it was, even though it was written from the perspective of a recovering addict, and I'm not a recovering addict, but I can hear something like that and be like, okay, that's just encouraging whoever, to not let one day ruin the rest of your life, and that's something that has always stuck with me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's crazy how, like, lyrics, can be interpreted, by different people in different ways. It's almost like, that saying, you hear what you want to hear. Sometimes
Right.
it's that way with music, Some
Absolutely.
people connect to things in lyrics that others don't, and it's just based on your previous experiences in life, I think. There is a song that I heard recently called My Friend.
Mm-hmm.
From Bones, but what really stood out to me is the lyrics that said, all of my demons are my friends, and I know they'll be there to the end. And it's just kind of like, the way I interpreted that is that you can't be ashamed of your demons, when you're having depression or anxiety or whatever it is that's haunting you in life, just because they're going to be there. That's part of you. So it's like, do you embrace your demons and acknowledge that they're there and overcome it, or do you let them kind of take over you? So that song really spoke out to me. So sometimes, yeah, it is the lyrics that reach out to me more so, but other times, no, I would just say the beat or sometimes the melody of the song. But even there's a new song Chainsmokers has called Sick Boy, which I guess could be interpreted by different people
Oh yeah.
in different ways. But yeah, it's kind of interesting, like, just knowing that, like, I don't know.
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm definitely interested in checking out and seeing what your playlist is. You'll have to definitely send me a few songs. I'm sure a lot of them I probably haven't heard, but I'd be willing to go check them out.
Yeah, no, for sure. I just like to create, like, different playlists based on my moods. So I'll have, like, one for when I'm angry. I'll have one for when I'm happy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just for, like, it'll be from, like, various artists. Like, it'll be rock, pop, anything.
Sure.
Like,
No, that makes a lot of sense, because there are a lot of there are songs for pretty much every type of feeling, every type of occasion. They're all out there. So that makes perfect sense. Sometimes the thing about certain songs is that they can sort of be bookmarks of particular events in your life, or they can remind you of a certain time, certain place. They're almost like a snapshot of people's lives, and I think that's why people connect with music in different ways, because it'll remind them of, I remember this song when I was in high school, or I remember I was listening to this song, and I was it was right when I was getting married or having a kid, or whatever it is. People find they're almost like little like stops on the roadmap of life, if you will. Do you find?
yeah.
Are there any particular songs that you connect with, on that level? Because I imagine that might bring, I want to say, more positive feelings. I want to say, or otherwise.
Yeah, the first one that comes to my mind is actually Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. I used to play piano, and I remember when I first started lessons, my dad got me a piano book with Moonlight Sonata in it. It's the original, it wasn't, like, watered down for beginners. And
Okay.
I was like, wow, you want me to play this? And he's like, yeah. So I practiced and learned it, and I told my piano teacher, and she kind of laughed, like, okay, like, you're going to play that for the recital? I was like, yeah, I want to. When I played it for her, her jaw dropped. Like, she couldn't believe that I actually had learned it on my own. But he was proud of me, and that's the song that sticks with me my whole life. Is whenever I hear it, I think of him, and I think of, and it's kind of like, I don't know if you know much about Beethoven, but I feel like he went through depression. I mean, he was deaf. He was
Right.
as a child. He had so much angst and so much that he wanted to say, and he did that through his music.
Sure,
And
sure.
so there are no lyrics to Moonlight Sonata. There's, it's just basically feeling. And when you listen to it, it does feel kind of sad or, kind of dark in a way, but also beautiful. So I don't know.
No, I have no doubt of that. I do admit I'm not as well versed in in Beethoven's life history. I imagine I imagine that a lot of composers like him during those times probably dealt with a lot of things privately, and certainly it's a product of the time and place that he was in. I think I think it was Mozart who was like a child prodigy, and who was just worked him to the bone. And I don't know how old he was when he died, but I think he passed away fairly young. So so I imagine there are a lot of stories like that, throughout history of composers who had to deal with those issues. Obviously that was a time before people knew anything about that.
Yeah. And it was also a time when, lyrics weren't really a thing. It was all symphony and orchestra.
Sure. Obviously, that's all instrumental music. But it is interesting that certain songs, or in this case, pieces of music, can connect people with different periods or different times and places in their lives. I think it's really important, and it can be even therapeutic that way.
Yeah, I agree.
One thing, if I could sort of segue back into more current events, in light of the recent shooting at Parkland, some people have brought up the idea that, or suggested the notion that there might be a correlation with some of these recent shooters, that they may be experiencing side effects due to certain prescriptions, or maybe taking the wrong prescriptions. I don't know if I necessarily buy into all that, but I was curious about what your thoughts on that suggestion was.
I mean, I don't know in this case if the shooter was on medication or not. I mean, honestly, I think, was he seeing a therapist, or because I know that they said he had made threats on his YouTube channel. That he had clearly said, "I'm going to be a professional, school shooter," whatever he said. I don't know, but
I had heard something about that. To be honest, I probably haven't been following the story as closely as I should have. I don't really know that much about the young man, but obviously he was, obviously, when you go on social media and post things like that, then there's something going on there. And as I understood, the FBI had looked into him, but I don't know what happened. I don't know why they didn't deal with it earlier, or maybe they couldn't. I don't really know. But
I think, I mean, I don't know if they're playing him out to be, broken and depressed and mentally ill because they want to avoid the true issue of gun control, but that's a whole different topic.
Sure.
It's more into politics that I'm not really qualified to speak about. I just,
right.
When you are starting, whether you're on medications or not, if you have mental illness, whether it's bipolar, depression, anxiety, or whatever else out there that's not even labeled yet as something, whether you're on medications or not, it's just important to be honest with yourself as a member of society. You have a responsibility to take care of yourself, to protect others as well, and if you're getting to the point where you're homicidal or suicidal, there's there's something that needs to be done. So if people need to reach out to him or he need to reach out to people, I can't say. I don't know, what his upbringing was like or if he even had the resources available. I know the teachers were afraid of him to bring backpacks to school. They wouldn't let him bring a backpack to school. I mean, you'd think that, the teachers or the counselors would follow up with him and, investigate, how they could help him if they needed to put him in a special, not like a facility or like a psych ward, but, just how do we help these people and make sure that this doesn't happen again? And whether it's with medication or not, I just think everyone has a responsibility to take care of themselves. So if you feel like you need to go to a therapist, go to a therapist. If you feel like you need to go to a doctor and get a prescription, then you can do that. But ultimately, it's just, respecting yourself first and being there for yourself before you can show up for others. That would probably be like my biggest advice to anyone who's going through this.
Sure, and I think there's a tendency for a lot of people, especially in the day of social media, where everyone has an opinion about everything and everyone has a solution or a theory on everything and can share it with everybody. I don't know. I think everyone's very quick to blame either medications or gun laws or the school system or whoever the president is or any of that. I think a lot of this, and you see a pattern of this behavior dating back to Columbine. I think a lot of that has to do with what kind of family do these shooters have? I mean, what kind of families do they come from? What kind of support system do they have? Mm-hmm. Even if teachers, were identifying him as a potential problem, again, if I think a lot of this starts and ends with the family. What kind of home are these people coming from? I think there's definitely a causality there, and I think a lot of that starts and ends with that. What kind of support system you have, because teachers and public officials and even mental health professionals can only do so much. It really has to do with who you surround yourself with. I remember when Columbine happened, I was in 8th grade, and I had transferred to a new school because the school I was at before was a place that was not good for me. I was being bullied. I was very depressed. I had even, some suicidal thoughts. Thankfully, I never took action. My sister, God bless her, intervened with, when it came to that and really kind of pulled me back from the brink. So I'm very fortunate to have a great support system at home with my sister and, my parents and, all my extended family. I remember hearing about this in 8th grade when Columbine was being shot up, and hearing that those kids were victims of bullying. And now, of course, I didn't know their backstory. I didn't know their situation or what it was, but I remember thinking about that. I had, like the thirst for revenge definitely makes sense, especially when you feel like you've been the victim of bad treatment or have particular people that you have grudges towards. And so like I remember feeling, and again, I never had any, I never had the desire to go and shoot up a school or anything, but I remember just thinking to myself like geez, there were times where I've desired revenge on people who bullied me, but never to that extent. So it did, I did definitely share a sense of compassion, I guess, with those guys who chose to do what they did. But at the same time, I would never condone that sort of behavior. And,
right.
So it definitely made me think, especially at a young age, about it. And now, with the young man who did this in Parkland, I think Cruz was his name, Brandon, or Nicholas Cruz. That was it. And again, I don't know as much about what what his situation was, if he was bullied. I don't really know. Probably as soon as we finish up this conversation, I'll go ahead and look into it some more, so I can know a little bit more of what I'm talking about, or at least pretend to. But I never claimed to be qualified to talk about any of this. But qualifications are overrated sometimes when you have your own podcast. But I digress. I guess I think going back to what we talk about, when it comes to to mental health issues and to people who unfortunately are the criminally insane, for lack of a better term. These things have to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. There is no just one solution to all of this. I think I think all of these different arguments definitely have merit to them, but I think I think it's foolish to kind of assume that this is the problem and that this will solve everything. Yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely a case-by-case basis, and I don't know if, sometimes the kids that are bullied and they want to seek revenge, I don't know if they're trying to get attention. If, like you said, if you don't have a support system, then it makes it all that much harder, I was lucky enough to have, my family for me growing up and helping me get through everything. So, like you said, you had your sister, and we all just need to be grateful for the people in our lives that do understand us, that, we're all human beings. Sometimes we just need to feel connected. Absolutely. And, I don't know, sometimes, if the criminals or the shooters, if they feel disconnected, I guess that makes it easier for them to act on these violent, acts, and sad, but honestly, all we can do right now is just keep the discussion open so that if someone out there is listening, they can know that they're not alone, that there are options out there for help and support. It's hard because everybody on social media is quick to judge. It is, and very quickly, and like you said, very quickly it becomes a political issue, and then you have people on different sides of the fence on that, and I definitely understand both sides of the argument, but it's sometimes it's not the only discussion that needs to happen. I think it's a much broader topic than what should the laws be or what have you. So that's all I got to say about that. Meghan, this has been an incredible conversation. I'm sure we could talk for hours about this, but I really do appreciate you reaching out to me like this, and hopefully I look forward to having you back. The timing of this thing is it's very ironic because you reached out to me before all this nonsense at Parkland went down, and but I think it's in a way. I don't know if it's good timing or bad timing, but it's interesting timing that we're having this conversation right now. So hopefully, thank you for having me on. It's good to know that there are people out there that are willing to have these discussions, and I've dealt with depression, anxiety, bipolar, whatever you want to call it. Everyone has labels for everything, but when it comes down to it, we're all just human beings, and if you need help, you shouldn't be afraid to admit it or talk about it, I guess. Absolutely. Before we go, is there anything in particular that you wanted to promote, or anything, any resources that you wanted to plug, either for yourself? I don't know if you want to put your information out there, but if there are any resources you wanted to share with people in order, who might want to reach out and and deal with these issues. Are there any resources locally here in Orlando that you know of, or that you can suggest to people who might be in the area? And again, people can hear this all over the world, technically, but I know that we're located here in Orlando.
the psychology and counseling group in Orlando. That's where I've gone for help myself.
I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, and I know, but hey, I gotta say, I know this is your first podcast or the first time you've done anything like that. I just want to say you did great. So I appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Jack. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thank you so much to my good friend, Dr. Meghan. She is a pharmacist and mental health specialist based here in Orlando. And, I wanted to pass on some information about that she suggested, such as the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, which, for those of us here in the States is 1-800-273-8255. And locally here in Orlando, you can check out the Psychology and Counseling Group, which is at thepsychgroup.com. I'll be posting these links and the information here in the description for all the proper spelling and all that. But I definitely want to thank Meghan for coming on and for talking to me about this. This has been kind of a unique episode where it was almost kind of by request, and she wanted to talk to me about this sort of thing. So I definitely want to thank her for reaching out to me and for giving me such a really cool conversation. It's I would like this show to become a lot more interactive as far as if people have any questions for me or anything in particular they want me to talk about or give my opinion on or any pieces of advice. I don't know if I'm that qualified to give anyone advice about anything, but if you want to talk to me, please do. But this issue, obviously I've made no secret that this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. It's something I certainly don't struggle with it to the degree that I used to, but like this week, for example, I was just feeling down about a lot of different things. And it wasn't one thing in particular. It was just a lot of little things in my life that were starting to get to me. And, but it took me, sometimes it takes a little while to realize that, I have so much to be thankful for. I really do. I've been very blessed to have what I have in life. I have a beautiful wife. I have a beautiful baby girl who's healthy. I have parents who love me. I have a great extended family and lots of great friends. And I have a good job. I'm able to do the things I want to do, like be in a band and do my podcast and and act in movies occasionally. I have a pretty good life. But sometimes I do get down, and I do get in those, in sort of a funk, in sort of a rut. I have those moments. Like I had that earlier this week, and it's there's no shame in it, and I'm glad that I have people to talk to. I was able to talk to my wife about, the things that were bothering me, and I was able to work it out. And so hopefully if you're listening to this, that, this show has made you feel a little bit better. I know this is kind of heavy, sort of a heavy topic, for a lot of people, but hopefully this helped. Hopefully this helped people feel a little bit better and know that they're not alone and know that they can talk to people and know that there are people out there who care about you and love you, wherever you are. And, that's all I can say. I mean, I can't thank you enough, wherever you are listening to this. I'm still amazed that people are interested in anything that I have to say. So thank you so much for listening. As always, that's, if it means that you and I are helping each other out, then this whole thing was worth it. So I definitely wanted to take some time to say that and to thank all of you. So as I mentioned, if you have anything you want me to talk about, if you have any questions or comments, suggestions for me, any topics you want me to touch on, make sure you follow me on Twitter at jackxconnor, like me on Facebook, facebook.com/jackconnormusic. You can feel free to check out my band, Vertebreaker, at facebook.com/vertebreakerband. And you can also email me at jackconnorpodcast@gmail.com, or maybe, when you tweet me at jackxconnor, you can use the hashtag Phoenix Report. If you're listening to this on YouTube, iTunes, make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, go back and listen to all the other episodes, like the one with Angel Graves of Devil's Envy. It was a few episodes ago. And stay tuned, because I'm coming up on my 50th, on episode number 50. And I think I'll bring back my first guest, Corey, who's also a regular on some of the wrestling podcasts I've done. I think I'm going to have him interview me for the 50th episode. So if you have any questions that you want to ask me, this is the perfect time to weigh in. Make sure you send me a message. And if you have any questions, you want Corey to ask me or want me to talk about, this is the perfect time. So thank you all for listening. This has been the Phoenix Report. I am Jack Connor, and be good out there. Be well. I'll talk to you later.